There is a kind of strength that doesn't carry weapons. It doesn't shout. It doesn't walk into a room demanding attention. And yet, it's the kind of strength that shook the Roman Empire and changed human history forever. Jesus had no army, no throne, no political power, and still, the world couldn't ignore him because his power wasn't in domination. It was in restraint, in stillness, in a humility so deep, it disarmed even the proudest of rulers. What if real power isn't about showing strength, but about having nothing to prove? Because Jesus didn't posture, he didn't perform, he didn't need applause to know who he was. He lowered himself by choice, and in doing so, he conquered darkness. The power that doesn't need to prove itself. There's a moment in Scripture that reveals more about true power than 1,000 battles ever could. Jesus stands before Pontius Pilate, a Roman governor with the authority to execute him. Pilate asks, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And what does Jesus do? He doesn't argue. He doesn't beg. He doesn't try to convince anyone of his greatness. He simply speaks a few words, and then he goes silent. That silence? It rattled Pilate more than any rebellion ever could, because when a man can stand before death, calm, still, and unshaken, that is a man no empire knows how to deal with. Jesus didn't need to win arguments. He came to win hearts, and he knew real authority never has to shout. So many of us are taught to prove ourselves, to fight back, defend, compete, dominate. But what if Jesus was showing us a different kind of power? A deeper, quieter, more unstoppable kind? A power that flows from humility, not weakness, not self-doubt, but the kind of humility that chooses to kneel, even when you have the right to stand tall. The kind that says, "I know who I am, so I don't need to show you." In this video, we're going to break down the strategic strength of Jesus' humility, why it worked, how it disarmed those who wanted to control him, and how you can walk in that same quiet power, starting today. 1. Humility is mastery over ego, not submission to others. He who kneels by choice already rules the room. The world teaches you to stand tall, to never bow, to always show strength. But Jesus, he knelt, not because he had to, but because he chose to. Hours before being betrayed, he wrapped a towel around his waist, got down on his knees, and washed the dirt off the feet of his disciples, including the one who would soon hand him over for 30 silver coins. That was not submission. That was dominance, strategic dominance. Because here's the truth. The strongest man in the room is not the one who stands above others, but the one who can lower himself without losing himself. Jesus wasn't reacting to pride. He was leading from identity. He didn't serve out of weakness. He served from a position of unshakable self-possession. He knew exactly who he was. He didn't need titles, didn't need recognition, didn't need to be seen as important. That is ego mastery. And ego mastery is a form of power most people will never understand. Most men serve their pride. They need to win arguments. They need to be praised. They need to be in control to feel valuable. Jesus was different. He controlled the atmosphere by controlling himself. And when you control yourself, you control the dynamic. You stop playing their game. And that is why humility is not passivity. It's not letting people walk over you. It's choosing when to kneel and why. It's knowing your value so deeply that nothing external can increase or diminish it. Let me put it plainly. If you always need to be seen as strong, you're not. If you're afraid to lower yourself, you're still owned by your pride. But if you can kneel, wash the feet of those who will fail you, and still walk into your purpose with fire in your heart and peace in your spirit, then you're untouchable. You've transcended the game. You've stepped into a different kind of power, the kind that doesn't demand to be respected, because it's already earned it. And that is the kind of power that breaks chains, not just of others, but of your own soul. 2. Strategic silence, when saying nothing says everything. Silence isn't the absence of power, it's the proof you don't need to use it. When Jesus stood before Pilate, facing death, false accusations, and the full force of Roman authority, he didn't plead, he didn't justify, he didn't explode in rage or try to defend his name. He stood, still. And when Pilate pressed him with questions, "Don't you hear the charges they bring against you?" Jesus remained silent. To the crowd, it looked like passivity. To the spiritually blind, it looked like defeat. But in reality, it was one of the most strategic power moves ever recorded. Jesus understood something most people never will. Silence disarms. Silence exposes. Silence controls the narrative without ever entering the noise. Because when you speak, you play by their rules. When you stay silent, you change the game. And Pilate, the most powerful man in that courtroom, he was the one visibly shaken, not Jesus. Why? Because silence is terrifying to those who rely on control. It forces them to project, to guess, to wonder what you're thinking, what you'll do, who you really are. Silence creates mystery. Mystery creates tension. And tension is power. Jesus wasn't quiet because he had no answer. He was quiet because he had nothing to prove. Most people speak to defend their image, but if you need to defend it, you haven't owned it yet. Real confidence doesn't perform. It doesn't scramble to fix perception. It lets misunderstanding sit. It knows. Time will reveal what pride tries to force. So how do you apply this? Stop rushing to defend yourself in every misunderstanding. Stop explaining your intentions to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. And most of all, learn to sit in the discomfort of silence. Because sometimes, what you don't say will shake the room more than anything you could scream. Jesus didn't just win hearts, he dominated the dynamic. Without raising his voice, without matching energy, without losing composure. And that's what makes silence a weapon the enemy can't predict and can't fight. 3. Confidence without arrogance. The power of knowing, not showing. When you truly know who you are, you don't need the world to agree. Jesus walked through crowds, calm, quiet, lowly in appearance. No golden crown, no military escort, no extravagant speech. And yet, every room shifted when he entered. People either fell to their knees or burned with hatred they couldn't explain. Why? Because real confidence threatens people more than aggression ever could. Arrogance is loud because it's insecure. Confidence is quiet because it's settled. Arrogance needs to be seen. Confidence is fine being underestimated because it knows it's unstoppable. And Jesus? He never sold himself. He never manipulated for power or tried to look important. He just moved with clarity, spoke with purpose, and left people wondering, who is this man? Here's the paradox: the arrogant need to announce themselves. The confident let presence speak louder than performance. Jesus never forced people to believe in him. He never demanded applause. He simply lived the truth and let that truth disrupt everything false. When you know who sent you, you don't need to prove why you're here. And yet, so many today confuse volume for value. They posture, they self-promote, they chase likes, followers, validation. But validation is the drug of the insecure. Jesus moved like he was already approved, because he was, by the only one that matters. And that's the key. When you're confident in God's approval, the world's applause becomes irrelevant. You don't chase clout. You carry clarity. You don't perform for the crowd. You walk in your calling, even when it leads to a cross. So how do you walk like that? Anchor your identity in something unshakable. Stop reacting to every opinion. Let your fruit speak louder than your words. And when you enter a room, don't try to prove you belong there. Move like you were sent. Because the deepest form of confidence isn't being the loudest in the room. It's being the one no one can shake, even when everyone doubts you. That was Jesus, and that can be you too. 4. Power and restraint. Why Jesus refused to fight back. When you can destroy, but choose not to, that's real power. When Jesus was arrested, he didn't resist. When he was mocked, spat on, beaten, he didn't retaliate. He told Peter, "Put your sword away. Do you think I cannot call on my Father, and he will at once send more than 12 legions of angels?" He could have. He had the authority. He had the right. But he didn't. Because restraint is the final form of power. The power to act and the choice not to. Most people confuse reaction with strength. They think speaking up fast, clapping back, standing their ground equals power. But it doesn't. That's emotional exposure. That's being controlled by the outside. Jesus was never controlled. Not by threats, not by pain, not even by death. He chose the cross, chose the silence, chose the sacrifice. Not because he lacked strength, but because he had something more powerful than muscle, mission. When your mission is bigger than your emotions, you stop letting temporary triggers dictate eternal outcomes. Think about it. If Jesus had reacted, if he had defended himself with force, the entire story of redemption would have collapsed. But because he restrained himself, he rewrote eternity. Now let's bring it to your life. Every day you face moments when you could react. You could prove a point. You could destroy someone with a word, a post, a move. But what if your greatest move is no move at all? What if holding the line, choosing silence, walking away, was the exact decision that builds your legacy? Anybody can swing a sword. Very few can sheath it and walk away with peace still intact. Jesus showed us how. He didn't come to play the world's game. He came to flip the board. And he did it not through dominance, but through restraint. That kind of self-control, that rattles people more than rage ever could. Because the person who doesn't need to respond has already won. 5. The strategy of going low. How Jesus won by kneeling first. The lower you kneel, the higher God can lift you. In a world obsessed with climbing higher, Jesus consistently went lower. Lower in status, lower in recognition, lower in comfort, lower, even to the point of death on a cross. And yet, he didn't lose. He redefined what it means to win. Because while everyone else was scrambling for power, Jesus took a knee. And by doing that, he stepped into a throne no man could ever take away. Let's break this paradox down. The world says, rise to dominate. But Jesus showed, kneel to reign. The world says, demand your worth. But Jesus said, let your worth be revealed through your sacrifice. You see, real greatness isn't in how high you stand. It's in how low you're willing to go, when you don't have to. That's what makes humility dangerous. It confuses the proud, it disarms the arrogant, and it positions you for a kind of influence that doesn't shout, it shapes. Anyone can chase spotlight. Only the truly powerful can serve in the shadows. Jesus wasn't interested in being crowned by men. He was too busy building a kingdom that would never fall. And here's the secret. The fastest way to rise in God's kingdom is to lower yourself in the world's. Because God doesn't elevate performers. He elevates the humble. And that's not just spiritual poetry. That's strategic truth. Because the humble don't need to be liked. They don't need control. They're not distracted by ego games. They stay focused, grounded. dangerous in their silence. And when the time is right, God lifts them. So if you feel unseen, if you feel like you've been kneeling for too long, remember this: Jesus knelt before he rose. And when he did rise, no one, not Rome, not death, not hell itself, could stop him. So choose the lower path, not because you're weak, but because you know that's where real power begins. Rule the room, not by noise, but by presence. Let's step back and look at what we've uncovered. Jesus didn't dominate by force. He didn't manipulate, intimidate, or seek approval. He ruled by doing what most fear. He mastered his ego. He used silence as a weapon. He moved with confidence, not arrogance. He restrained when he could have unleashed. And he chose to kneel before he rose. That's not weakness. That's war strategy. Because in a world addicted to performance, nothing is more disruptive than stillness. In a culture built on self-promotion, nothing is more powerful than humility. Jesus flipped the script, and if you want to walk in unshakable power, you'll have to flip yours too. Let them underestimate you. Let them misread your silence. Let them think you're weak. And watch what God does with your restraint. Because power isn't in how loud you speak. It's in how calm you stay. It's in how you lead yourself when no one's clapping. It's in your ability to not react and still remain in control. That's not just spiritual maturity. That's spiritual dominance. So here's your move. Stop proving. Start embodying. Stop performing. Start practicing. Walk into rooms like Jesus did, with nothing to prove and everything already secured in who you are. Because when you move like that, people notice, even if they don't understand why. And if you're ready to go deeper into this mindset, if you want to learn how to rule the room without saying a word, watch this next. The most powerful person in the room is often the quietest one. Because silence isn't empty, it's full of strategy.